So this class is being recorded as usual, and this is me, Dr. Sameh, and this is A230A. So what is and this is obviously the class before the midterm, and today we're doing Candide, a very interesting novella, and it's a novella. Remember when I said what is interesting about this course is that it takes you on a tour across different genres. We started off with plays and tragedies, more specifically, and now we're doing novellas. We're doing a narrative. So when I say a narrative, I mean a novel, a novella, or a short story. So why is it called a novella? Because it's not too long, or it's not long enough for me to call it a novel, and it's not too short for me to call it a short story. It's somewhere in the middle. Novella, and also what is interesting about it is the fact that it is a translated piece of work. Translated means that we're not reading the original. So Candide, the novella that I'm talking about, is a translated piece of work. It was originally written in French by the French philosopher Voltaire, and it got translated to so many languages, and English happens to be one of those languages. Remember what we said about ages and time periods, and the fact that you have to study the time period so that you can have a better understanding of why the author is saying what he is saying. Of course, he doesn't say things directly. He says things through the characters, their actions and motivations and everything in between. So a full understanding of plays and novels and novellas is not possible unless you thoroughly read about the age historically, culturally, and everything in between. So this is actually happening. Somebody sending something to the group. So we need to stop sending stuff so that we can, yes. Okay, great. So like we did with the other works, we started off with the background. We got to know the background very well, and we started to set the plays against the background. Remember when we spoke about established order and everything. Now it's the 18th century that we're addressing. Okay, so with Othello and the Duchess of Malfi, it was the Elizabethan and the Jacobean age. We're talking about the 16th and the 17th century, and even prior when we spoke about the Middle Ages up to the Renaissance. This time around, it's the 18th century. And the 18th century is known as the age of reason. Reason means the mind, using the mind. So the 18th century was known for this reliance and dependence on the mind. Everything has to be or has to go through the mind. If the mind accepts it, it is fine and acceptable. If the mind does not, they need to reconsider it. Okay, so what does or with what did or where did the mind take the people of the 18th century? It took them to lots of achievements. They have went beyond their borders, and they are now in the Americas, discovering them, colonizing them, making them viable environments. They went beyond their borders, and they are now in places as far as India. They are exploring things. I mean, medicine has progressed. Science of different kinds, universities were opening and receiving people. So it was a time of advancement on the different levels. So people were happy, obviously. People believe that this is history is going to go like this. It's going to be all progress all the time. They were very obviously optimistic about the future. They went this way. I mean, the level of living and styles of living got better, and lots of advancements if you compare Europe at the time to other places in the world. So people obviously had every reason to think that they live in the best of all possible worlds. The time couldn't have been better for them. The places, I mean, Europe couldn't have been better. And this is what they believed in. And the philosophies of the time used to reflect that. The philosophies of the time reflected this sense of optimism that people felt. Um, so, what happens if you have issues and problems? What happens if it's not all honey and milk? So, you're saying that there is progress, and you're also saying that there is, I mean, we should be optimistic, and you're also saying that uh, life couldn't have been better, and we are in the final analysis beset by our world rather is beset by and is governed by a benevolent being, by a benevolent God. Benevolent means muhsin, khair. So they were also religious, and they believed that God does nothing wrong. Okay, and then they are hit with a number of catastrophes and a number of calamities, like having an earthquake that kills thousands of people, having volcanoes, having the problem of pain in the world. They keep asking themselves, why do we have pain if it's a world that is governed by a benevolent God? Why wouldn't God allow pain and disease? Um, and then you would have philosophers who would come up and they try to explain the ways of God to people. Okay, so the play, I'm sorry, the novella is all about that. It's about people in the novel or the novella who actually we have two strands or two conflicting and competing forces. You have people who are behind the idea of optimism and that we live in the best of all possible worlds. And I mean, the world is governed by a benevolent God, and people should be optimistic. And if it's only if there are defects and issues in the world, it's these are done for a reason, and only God knows. So people shouldn't question and challenge the wisdom of God, according to this group of people. You also have a group of people who are very skeptical. Skeptical means that they doubt everything. They don't believe in the benevolence of God. Let me put it this way. They are very rational. They think of things in rational terms. You don't talk to them about faith, iman. No, they want something rational. If you still remember Plato when we spoke about the difference between using or accepting tradition as is and using your mind. So we're going to have the self same issue where you have two two conflicting forces: those who believe in faith, those who believe in perhaps the supernatural, and those who believe that we should use our senses. If I see something, I believe in it. If I don't see it, I don't believe. So this is what we call empiricism, تجريبية. So you have this conflict between whatever is intellectual, something that you think about but you cannot lay your hand on, and something that you can sense and feel and eat and taste. If it's something that you can lay your hand on, it's concrete, you accept it. Okay. So what is it that Voltaire, the philosopher and the writer, was trying to prove? He is trying to prove that uh, um, it's either um people convince us that what happens in the world is for a reason and for a good reason, and they have to explain the reason, and I'm talking about the bad things. Or if they cannot, then we have a problem. We shouldn't be believing them. So in order to give us those ideas, he doesn't give us those ideas in an essay, for example. No, he writes a novel in which he has characters, and those characters represent those different ideas and values. And then at the end, he leaves it up to us to decide, to see which team we should affiliate ourselves to. Okay, so the novel is called Candide. And when I say Candide, does it ring any bells? Have you done Candide before? Have you heard the name before? It's
No.
fine if,
Yeah.
yeah, no, this is the first time, which is okay. Nice, good. Okay, so when I say Voltaire, have you heard of the name before? Voltaire?
Yes.
No.
No. So that's fine. You don't know who Voltaire is. That's fine. Okay. Voltaire is a French philosopher. Yes. Okay. And Candide is a novella, and it is a French novella translated into English. Are we reading the original? No, we're reading the translation. Okay. What's the main idea? Like I said, this is um, a journey. It's both physical journey and it's also an intellectual and philosophical journey. So in this novel, we have people who are embarking on a journey. Where are they going? They are moving from one country to another, from one continent to another. Okay. What seems to be the reason? It seems the reason is that they are escaping from the horrors of civil wars, um, and they are trying to look for safer places. But obviously, the writer has a different agenda. Okay, they move from one country to another, and it seems that the writer is trying to get us exposed to the different cultures and what people believe in those different cultures so that we can decide which way of life is better, which religion is better. So we'll have different countries and different continents. And the people that we meet at the beginning of the novel are going to move from one country to another. And they are going to listen to the people in those different countries. And then towards the end, the writer is leaving it all to us. And we decide whether um, religion is a good thing, whether one of those religions, Islam, for example, is better than the other, because they are going to end in Constantinople, in modern day Istanbul in Turkey. So as if he is trying to also, um, I mean, he's giving all the religions and all the cultures a chance. So the fact that he ends with a Muslim country means that perhaps he's telling us, why don't we try those guys? It doesn't mean that he is very conclusive about this conclusion. No. Like I said, this is his style. He gives you things, and then it's up to you to whether to agree or not agree. So it's travel literature. This is what we call travel literature, where you have the characters traveling from one country to another. So the question now is whether Voltaire is the first to have those kinds of travels in his novels, and the answer is obviously no. He stands in a long line of travelogues, if you like, novels and novellas on about travelers. It didn't start with him. It started way back, as we're going to see. Okay, so what is the aim? We said that the aim that he is people are on the lookout about a better place. Better place in terms of how women are treated, with a better place in terms of stability and peace, in terms of I mean, finding answers to life's big questions, fundamental questions. Why do we have pain in the world? Why do we have disease? Why earthquakes hit uninvited and unadvertised? So as you can see, this is big. This is very serious. Let's move to the slides and see. Okay. So it's Candide that we're doing. Candide is the title. So it's Candide, and it's also or Optimism. So the main title is Candide, and the side title is Optimism. And like I said, this was written by Voltaire in the 18th century. So Voltaire is the author. Okay, and what is it that he wrote? He wrote Candide. And what is the other side or subtitle? It is Optimism. And when it was written in the 18th century. How much do we know about the 18th century? We know that it is the age when people started to focus more on the mind. They um, they started to say that the hold of religion on things is not and should not dominate. We should also try other aspects of life, other tools of thinking, and one way would be the mind. So this was called the age of reason, عصر العقل, and it was also called the age of enlightenment, عصر التنوير or al-anwar. Okay, so Candide, if you say Candide, it doesn't mean a lot to you, but if you say optimism as a subtitle, you may get a hint at what we are in for. So optimism, it means that we're talking about perhaps people who are optimistic. We're going to check whether optimism is justified or not, whether people have good enough reasons to be happy, to be optimistic, or what. Who are the main characters? We have Candide is the main character, and we have Pangloss. So Candide is the illegitimate son of one of the barons, a noble individual. Noble is a rank, not a quality. So
Doctor,
Candide, yeah,
you are
yes.
not sharing the slide.
Oh, برضو, that's for the second time. Sorry. Am I now? Can you
Yes.
see the slide?
Yes.
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 Alhamdulillah. Okay, so like I said, this novel is written by Voltaire. And Voltaire is a French writer and philosopher. And the title of the novella is Candide, and the subtitle is Optimism. Um, this was written in the 18th century. Um, in terms of places, it's a number of trips and journeys where the characters move from one country to another. And through those movements and during them, we see a great deal of um, incidents, misunderstandings, challenging of ideas and concepts, which gives you the impression eventually that the writer is mocking something, is making fun of the manners and the philosophies of the time. So, what were the philosophies that were widespread at the time? The philosophies at the time were primarily the philosophy of optimism. Optimism and also intellectualism. Optimism means that you're happy about what happens in society, you feel satisfied, you feel that history is moving forward, and you feel that you couldn't have lived in a better uh, time. So this was the time, believe in science and in progress. And then you have um, and then you have the writers giving us this, giving us people who are promoting those feelings of optimism, and then telling or showing us whether those feelings should be there or they should be challenged. He's going to put us in situations where we need to reconsider this idea of optimism. So who are the characters? We have Candide, uh, um, who is an illegitimate son of one of the barons, one of the uh, you know one of those noble people over there, and he has a tutor, a private tutor or teacher by the name of Pangloss. So Candide is following his teacher. His teacher Pangloss is optimistic, and he represents the philosophy of optimism in the novel, in the novella. And Candide, typical as a student, he follows his teacher until he realizes that optimism is obviously without good justification, and the miseries in the world are not compatible with the feeling of optimism. So again, the tool that Voltaire is using is satire, and it's an indirect one. Satire means that you're making fun of something. So you have a novel. Whenever you have a novel that mocks something, that makes fun of people and circumstances and situations, this is called satire. So Candide, the novella, is a satire. Let's move on. Okay. Before we move on, we need to agree on the meaning and the definition of some concepts. Why? Because we're going to meet those concepts a lot in the novel. One concept would be the idea of evidence, to have evidence for something. Evidence means proof that something exists or something does not exist. So this is number one. So the word evidence. So you tell me, for example, that Dr. Sameh came to class yesterday. And I'm telling you that Dr. Sameh didn't come to class yesterday. So you show me evidence. You go to the shared file and give me the link of the class. So this is evidence. Okay, this is proving that he attended. And then we move to the word rational. Rational, when something is rational, it means that it is based on the mind. Rational thinking, for example, when you use your mind in order to judge things, you use your power of reason. And then empirical. Empirical means that you may use the mind, it is true, but you also use your senses in order to make sense of the world. You don't use only the mind, because according to some people, the mind is not the things that you realize through the mind are not concrete enough. So empirical means tajribi. So whatever you can experiment, whatever you can try with your hands and senses. And then we go to words like benevolence, omnipotence, and omniscience. So this is all related to God or any deity for that matter. So benevolence means benevolence is obviously the noun, and it means benevolent. The adjective is benevolent. Benevolence is charitable, is doing only good things. Muhsin, ihsan. So referring to God as being a benevolent God, which He is. And then we have omnipotence, all powerful. Also, when we talk about God, we say that He has omnipotence, or He is uh, omnipotent, all powerful. And then you have omniscience, which means all knowing. Okay, again, when we talk about God, we say that God is benevolent and is all powerful and is all knowing. Okay, and then we move to the idea of evil. Evil. And evil philosophically is divided into two things. It's either natural evil or moral evil. So natural evil means the natural disasters that we see in the world. When we talk about earthquakes, um, when we talk about volcanoes, storms, tsunamis, those are natural evil. And then you have or manifestations of natural evil. And then you have moral evil. Moral evil is um, a different type of evil. When we talk about pain and disease, when we talk about wars. Okay, so the idea is, or the question is, how come we have evil in the world? And the answer would be, why? Why are you asking this question? And the one who asks is going to tell us, you're telling us that God is governed, the world is governed by a benevolent God. The world is governed by an all-powerful God. The world is governed with an all-knowing. But how come we still have evil? Okay, so this is the main argument. Okay, benevolent God and evil are not compatible. Okay, so those philosophers are trying to say that if you believe that there is a benevolent God, you should tell us why there is evil, because a benevolent God would prevent and stop evil from the world. Stop them or stop evil. How? Because he is all powerful. He is omnipotent, which means that he can conquer and defeat evil. And also because he is all knowing, omniscience, which means that he knows evil before it happens, evil things like earthquakes and disease. So with his power, he can prevent it. Again, why do we have it? This is the question. Let's move on. Okay, so what we're having here are a number of events, and those events are going to lead to the ideas that we're talking about, especially the idea of journeys. Whether those journeys are physical, you move from one country to another, from one continent to another, or metaphorical, you move within yourself, which means that you learn lessons and realize things. At one point, you believe in something, but over time, through introspection, through thinking, you change your mind and you become different. So, we're talking about journeys in the 18th century, talking about the period between 1680 and 1790. So, what triggered those journeys? Whether on the level of whatever is physical journeys, or on the level of the intellect. So we have two major events and upheavals in the history of Europe. We have the Glorious Revolution in 1688, and this is an English one, and you have the French Revolution in 1789. So those two revolutions are milestones and turning points in the history of Europe. Okay. Also, during the time, we have seen the expansion of European power around the globe. So Europe started to move beyond its borders, and countries in Europe started to have colonial holdings in the Americas and in Asia and all those parts of the world. Okay, so when you travel, and of course you send correspondence home, you talk to your family back home, and you tell them about what you have seen in the countries that you are visiting. So that would lead to a new kind of literature that we call uh, travel writing. Okay, because you're going to talk about your experiences, what kind of people you met, what kind of food you ate, and what kind of dress you had to perhaps wear. Um, so we're talking about travel writing, which was very widespread in the 18th century, but it didn't start there. It started way back. Again, why do we have travel-related writings? Remember we said that Europe started to move beyond its borders, and people started to travel to other countries, and they started to kind of give us what they have seen. Also, during the time the middle class started to arise, I mean, people from the middle classes, and they started to show interest in reading things, whether those things are from books, magazines, periodicals, or newspapers. Um, so Candide is one of those travel pieces of writing where Candide is going to travel from one country to another along with Pangloss in order, like I said, to discover the world and also to have answers for those big questions. Why do we have evil in the world? Why do we have pain? Why people slaughter each other and everything? So I said that Voltaire is not the very first one to write travel literature. Actually, he stands in a long line of writers who wrote this kind of literature, travel writing. He has antecedents. When I say antecedents, I mean people who came before him. One of them is Herodotus, and Herodotus is a Greek historian of the 5th century, and he was interested in relating the morals and religious of the countries he passed by. So he traveled to so many countries, and he used to kind of write about them in his books. This is Herodotus. The second one is Pausanias or Pausanias from the 2nd century. He traveled across Greek, and he normally describes the belief systems and the cults in the countries that he visited. A third antecedent is the English writer Thomas More, who wrote a piece of work called Utopia. In the Utopia, he gives us a place where there are the ideals of equality and the fair distribution of wealth was there. It was a utopian society where everything was perfect. And then you have the Irish writer Jonathan Swift, who wrote Gulliver's Travels. This is also an antecedent and an influence on uh, Voltaire. So Voltaire was not the first one to write travel literature. So Voltaire is very similar to Jonathan Swift in his novel The Gulliver's Travels. He is using Swiftian satire. So we're talking about travel writing, which is now a journey in of itself. And this journey can be imagined, and it can also be. Okay, give me a second, everyone. Give me a second. Hello, can you hear me?
Yes, doctor.
Yeah. Okay. So it's Voltaire that we're talking about. It's travel writing that we're talking about. And travel writing, as the name suggests, is when you move from one place to another, when you have stories that tell us about that. And those stories can be real, can be like, for example, Marco Polo, and when he went to China, for example, and started to talk about what he has seen over there. And it can be imagined, and from the imagination of an author or a writer, like Candide, that like Voltaire. Um, okay, so when we have those travel kinds of writers and those kind of writings, you have talk about what people see in those new places and what they can bring to their cultures. And um, so sometimes they benefit, sometimes they are neutral. They only show us what happens in those countries. And sometimes they can criticize those countries, their way of life. They make judgments. And sometimes they compare and say that those cultures are perhaps better than ours, and that allow us to check the way we do things. So, like I said, we spoke about Herodotus as being one of the early travel writers, where he normally focuses on whatever is uh, um, has to do with the morals and the religions of the countries that he visits. And then we move on to other writers like Pausanias, like we said. And then in the 16th century, we have Thomas More, who is an English scholar. He wrote, like I said, Utopia. And in Utopia, he is envisioning a place that is perfect and ideal, a perfect place where women are not treated badly, where there is a fair distribution of wealth, where there is no injustice of any kind. Another influence, another important element would be Candide, or would be Gulliver's Travels, and I'm sure some of you may have heard the novel or even have read it. So this was written by Jonathan Swift. It is also travel literature, but it is if Thomas More's work was utopian, this was anti-utopian. It talks about the bad things that happen in the world. So anti-utopian means dystopian. When I say that something is dystopian, it means that it makes fun of those who think that there is a place that is perfect. So there is no perfect place in the world, and that's why we call it dystopian. He gives us places that are full of injustice, that are full of corruption and bad things. So what do you think? Voltaire, when we have read Candide, we're going to discover that it is a dysutopia, not a utopia, because it doesn't provide us with a perfect place. So if a novel is presenting us with a perfect place, we call it a utopia. If it presents us with a what? A place that is full of corruption and all these kinds of things, we call it a dysutopia. And then we go on um, and talk about Voltaire himself and Candide. And we're going to notice that of all the other travel writers, Jonathan Swift, seems to be having the greatest and the foremost effect on Voltaire. And then we have another influence, and this is Samuel Johnson, who wrote The History of Rasselas, where we're talking about the prince of Abyssinia. Abyssinia is modern-day Ethiopia, and the prince is also on a quest. He wants to find the perfect place. Okay, and then we move to Candide in order to decide what kind of genre it is. So we determine the genre based on the ideas that the writer is trying to present. So Candide is sometimes referred to as a roman. Roman means a story, but it doesn't follow the strict conventions of the novel. If I can call it a novel and I try to apply the conventions and the elements of a novel, I'll find that it's not a novel in the full sense of the word. So we can't safely say that it is a novel. Some people say that it's a philosophical tale. So it's a tale, but it has philosophy because it talks about big things. Why do we have evil? Why do we have pain in the world? Is the world governed by a benevolent deity or God? So these are big questions. That's why sometimes people say that it is a philosophical tale, more of a fable that gives us moral lessons. Um, some people said it's a satire. And I told you satires are writings that ridicule and mock the feelings of individuals or institutions or societies. Sometimes they call it, it is a satire, it is true, but it is an indirect satire, which allows the readers to draw their own conclusions without diminishing the intensity of the ridicule. So it is satire, but it's indirect. Indirect in the sense that the writer does not give you easy answers, or he does not answer any of the questions that he poses in the work. So these are the different genres that people thought of when they spoke about Candide. So it can be a roman, a novel, can be a philosophical tale, can be a satire, or an indirect satire. Okay, so this is what we have said. We're not going to repeat it. Okay, of course, whether it is a direct satire or an indirect satire, it is a weapon or a tool that Voltaire is using in order to make fun of the philosophies of the time, especially the philosophy of optimism. Um, People also came to the conclusion that together with the physical journeys that the characters engage in moving from one country and from one continent to another, we have philosophical journeys, um, journeys where people think about things, people engage with the big ideas. So the physical journey would be that they move from one country in Europe to another, and the intellectual and the philosophical journeys is that they learn certain lessons as they move. They, for example, will realize that optimism is not justified in some quarters and in some situations. Okay, so what is the big philosophical journey that they engage in, or intellectual journey? It's the generally that one like Banglas, who is the tutor and the teacher of Candide, is engaged in. Um, it's a journey where he moves. Actually, he doesn't change. He represents the philosophy of optimism. But over time, the other people, especially Candide, who are with him, were going to realize that his philosophy is false, and it doesn't have any backing in reality. So what are some of the ideas that are going to change? And this is the philosophical journey that we're talking about. Some of the ideas that this guy is keen on would be the idea that things cannot be other than as they are. He is trying to tell people that, we cannot change anything. Those things were meant to happen. And whether they are good or bad, people need to realize that everything is necessary for the best of ends, which means that you may see it evil or bad, but no, you are unable to look at the big picture. And one of his ideas also was there was no effect without a cause. And one of his ideas is that we live in the best of all possible worlds. Okay, so three Pangloss philosophy. Voltaire parodies or makes fun of the optimism that characterized Europe of the mid-18th century. So people were very optimistic. So through Pangloss and his philosophy and the failings and the frustrations that people felt because of the wars, because of the enslavement and the colonization of people, we come to the realization that this guy and his philosophy is false. Again, Voltaire is not only attacking the philosophy of optimism as given by Pangloss, he is also attacking Alexander Pope, the very famous English poet who also believes in optimism and that everything is for the best, and also the German philosopher Leibniz. These are people that Voltaire is attacking. He is empirical while they are intellectual. Empirical means that he believes what he sees, and what he sees is evil. He sees earthquakes. He sees pain and disease in the world, and say, yeah, you cannot convince me that there is a benevolent God in the world. And they keep telling him, no, it's only that you are limited in your thinking. It's only that you cannot realize the wisdom of God, and you have this. This is obviously the cover page where you have Candide is the title, and then Optimism is the subtitle. And Voltaire is saying that this is translated from the German of Dr. Ralph. Who is Dr. Ralph? Well, obviously, we don't know. So obviously, this is also one way of saying that I didn't write it. It's taken from German, like Dr. Faustus did or Marlowe did. Again, to avoid being asked, why are you saying these things? Why are you doing this? Okay. Um, the novel has as its main character a naive narrator. Naive means stupid. Um, so, in the sense that what he says is, obviously contradicts what happens on the ground. So, from the outset, from the beginning, the reader is thus given very clear hints, not to take at face value the narrator. So the writer is trying to tell us, no, then don't take for granted what the narrator is saying. See and look and judge for yourself. Okay, one of the techniques that Voltaire is also using here is what we call literary irony. You know what irony is? Being ironic means that you see the discrepancy or the gap between two things. Somebody is saying something, but you know that it is not true, for example. Somebody is delusional means that perhaps he believes that he is best or is better than anybody else, when literary irony happens with Pangloss, especially when he tells us about when he embraces his philosophy of optimism, when everything in the novel is telling us that his optimism is wrong, because and wrong-headed, because people are suffering, and he is telling us we should be happy and everything. So again, optimism is the main idea, and obviously it's not optimism, it's the attack on optimism. It's um, what it's the attack of optimism, and it's uh, the idea that optimism is not justified. We don't live in the best of all possible worlds. We have never lived in the best of all possible. This is the main idea, that people in the novel or in the novella, like Pangloss, are saying that we live in the best of all possible worlds. But what happens in the novella is the total opposite. So Voltaire's philosophical views, as expressed in Candide, were defined in opposition to the belief in optimism, which dominated the philosophy of his day. Okay, like I said, who promotes this kind of idea of optimism? Who believes in it and is trying to preach it and to tell everybody about it? It's Pangloss, who is the teacher of Candide. He is the inexhaustible spokesman on behalf of optimism. So everybody knows that he promotes this idea of optimism. So he is also presented as an exaggerated comic character or creation, again, in order to make fun of him and what he stands for. And what he stands for is optimism. And again, he stands for his age. The age in the 18th century in Europe was the age of optimism. They believe that we're moving forward in history, and it's very progressive, and we're making progress, and everybody is happy. Uh, Again, Voltaire is also hinting at the idea that who in society can feel optimistic. He's telling us that it's the rich, and they are a minority. It's men, because
Doctor, your voice is cut off.
somebody is muting me. Can you imagine? Can you hear me now?
Yes, we can.
Okay. So where did I stop? I stopped with the idea that uh, I stopped with the idea that, yeah, the rich, who are a minority, have every reason to be optimistic, right? The healthy, if you're healthy, you're optimistic, right? If you're a man and you have all the rights, you are optimistic. Okay. So how about women? How about the sick? How about the slaves? How about the poor, who are, when you put them together, they become the majority. They shouldn't be optimistic, but because there is nothing to be optimistic about. Okay. Okay. So who talks about this idea of optimism in the 18th century? Who promotes it? A number of philosophers. One of them is Anthony Ashley Cooper. We know him as Shaftesbury. And Shaftesbury is focusing on the idea that human nature is good, man is good by nature, And again, he doesn't kind of show any misgivings about human nature, and that everything is also is moving for the better because man is good and is doing whatever makes everybody else happy. And then you have Alexander Pope, another English, but this time around, this guy is a poet. He also believes in optimism, and he believes that if there are issues and defects in the world, it's because we're looking at it from a limited perspective. You need uh, to have an open mind. You need to also look at the bigger picture. Don't judge things based on very small. You look at the grand scheme of things. He wrote a long poem called Essay on Man, and in this philosophical poem, he says that no matter how imperfect and complex and inscrutable the universe appears to be, it functions in a rational fashion according to the natural. He says that you're looking at very small things, very small imperfections, and then you're not looking at the grander and the bigger picture. He looks at the world or the universe as a whole, as a perfect work of God. It may appear, or some of it may appear evil and imperfect, but he says this is due to our limited mindset and limited intellectual capacity. And then we have a philosopher by the name of Leibniz. And Leibniz is saying if we trust that God is omniscient, which means knows everything, if we trust that God has unlimited power, then we shouldn't challenge his capacity, um, because we trust God and we trust that he is all powerful and all seeing and everything. They told him, okay, so that's good and everything, but how do you account for and how do you justify the nasty things that happen in the world? He would say, well, what you're looking at are very few examples. You need to look at the world from a bigger perspective. He says that it's only God who has the knowledge of that, and he focuses on the idea of us focusing on the greater good. So you can have partial evil, okay, شر جزئي, but you have greater good, خير كلي. So this is his argument. He says, since God is perfect by definition, it follows that he can do nothing wrong. If we agree that God is perfect, and we all do agree, so it follows that what you see as wrong is not wrong. It's only your limited vision. And they started to give him examples of earthquakes and volcanoes, and lots of disasters. And he insisted that these are very small things if you compare them to the grand and the beautiful things that God has created. Uh, so according to him, in the ultimate scheme of things, there exists a sufficient reason for each and every event. Um, again, it's cause and effect that he is promoting. And again, when he fails in everything, he tells them, listen, come. Um, aren't we all sinners in one way or another? Aren't we uh, um, the inheritors of the sin of Adam and Eve? Are we all sinners? So this is perhaps why we're inflicted with pain. This is perhaps why we have disease in the world. This is perhaps why we have earthquakes. So when he fails to convince people, he tells them, yeah, okay, so we are the inheritors of the original sin of Adam and Eve, and obviously we are paying for them by having those earthquakes and those natural evils. It's the same thing. This is what we've been talking about. Okay. And this was especially frequent in the discussions, the idea of pain and the idea of evil. Um, why do we have pain in the world if there is a benevolent God? Why do we have evil in the world if we have benevolent God? Okay, so if you are an empiricist, a greeby, you depend on the senses. What do your senses tell you? I mean, you see earthquakes, you feel them. Sometimes you are their victim. So this is empirical. Okay, so I don't see any or I don't feel any benevolence in the world. So that's why I'm not going to believe that uh, there is wisdom in what happens. If I am a rationalist, I'm going to start engaging in philosophical arguments in order to prove that we live in the best of all possible worlds. So Leibniz is a rationalist philosopher who only uses his mind. It's all about arguments, logical ones. And he stresses the fact that if we agree that God is perfect by definition, it follows that he can do no wrong and no questions asked. You shouldn't be asking beyond that. Voltaire, on the other hand, is empiricist. Empiricist means that he uses sense experience, his senses. He sees with his eyes the miseries that people are in, the diseases that are widespread, uh, um, the imperfections in the world, the tsunamis. He can see them. He says, I cannot kind of ignore these things that I feel and sense because you're telling me or you're giving me a logical or a rational argument. Okay, so Voltaire, like other people, perhaps were good Christians. They believed in the benevolence of God and His grace and everything until a number of events happened, and those events started to shake their optimism and started to shake their uh, uh, belief and faith in God. One of them was a fissure or that caused a big earthquake in Lisbon, the capital of Portugal. This was in 1755, and this claimed the lives of thousands of people. And not only that, it was on a feast. It was a feast. People are happy. They were going to churches and celebrating, and all of a sudden, this earthquake came and it killed thousands of people. So Voltaire stopped, and other people said, "What's happening? It's even a religious occasion. Are you trying to tell me that still have a benevolent God?" This is obviously what Voltaire is saying. So his question is, how could a benevolent and all-seeing God or deity possibly have ordained this, allowed this to happen? So, like I said, people were happy. Were outside cooking their breakfast on open fires, and they were enjoying the time and celebrating, thanking God. And then all of a sudden, you have this violent tsunami that swept in the sea, where thousands upon thousands of people were killed. The whole infrastructure of Lisbon or the city was destroyed. Again, after a number of years, they had this 7-year war, which also claimed the lives of hundreds and thousands of people. Again, where, according to those guys, and according to where is God, God should have interfered to prevent this from happening. This is Alexander Pope and his poem, and what he said that we're limited in our views, telling us that all partial evil is universal good, but we don't know. And then we have examples in the novel where um, there are situations where Pangloss insists on his optimistic philosophy and is even in preventing people from kind of saving each other, because he believes that if they have to die, they have to die because this is what was meant for them. This is part of the grand scheme of things. And there is this example when they were obviously on a boat or something, Candide and Pangloss, and there was this Anabaptist. Anabaptist is it's a religious denomination in Christianity. Like you have Catholics and you have Protestants, you have Anabaptists. So there was this guy who is Anabaptist. He was virtuous and everything, and he was drowning. And Candide was trying to help him, save him, but Pangloss stopped Candide, and telling him, "Listen, leave him. He was meant to drown and to die this death." And the Lisbon harbor was built, obviously, for him to die there. Okay, see? Uh, Another example, um, again, the idea of having volcanoes beneath Lisbon. And when Bangladesh was asked about it, he said, well, it has to have happened because it couldn't have happened somewhere else, because this is where it meant to happen. According to him, for all is well. Again, he's trying to tell people that you're looking from your limited perspective. This is, of course, funny because these are not convincing justifications, if you like. Again, the focus here is on the idea that whatever happens, happens for a reason, and the reason is beyond us because we're limited human beings. But if we trust in God, we trust that He does nothing wrong. This is Leibniz, and this is also Alexander Pope and all those kinds of optimistic um, writers and philosophers. Um, Another justification would be when they fail to convince people, when people come to them and say, "Where is God? How can He allow evil in the world? How can He allow pain and disease and earthquake?" They tell them, "Listen, you as human beings are sinners. Don't you know that? Don't you realize that you are the inheritors of the original sin, خطيئة الأولى by Adam and Eve? You are paying for that. You are paying for this kind of sin." Again, like we said, what is interesting about the style of Voltaire in Candide is that he doesn't say everything, or he doesn't give you the answers to the questions. He poses the questions, he asks the questions, and he leaves it all to you to come up with your own. He doesn't impose, he only offers you or gives you situations. um, Again, this is all about the style of Candide and the style used in Candide by Voltaire. Um, Together with the narrator that we agreed on, this German one at the beginning, we also have female narrators or narrators, which is obviously new because we don't have this idea that women can come out. Remember, this is only the 18th century, the 17 something. So women were not given prominence, women were not given the opportunity to speak and narrate. So what we have here is different. We have female narrators in Candide, and they tell us, they give us a number of tales, and through their narrative, we get to know more about what kind of life women used to lead. That obviously it wasn't very um, um, inviting kind of life. It was very miserable. So you have Dr. Ralph, who is the original narrator or the frame narrator, if you like, and uh, um, you have three episodes in the novel, and they are recounted and given by women. Chapter 8 is narrated by Kjonagund, who is the lady love of Candide, and she retells the events of the opening chapters from her perspective. When she was raped, she has to run for her life, she has to work in cheap jobs. And then in chapters 11 and 12, we have the narration by the old woman who tells Kjonagund the story of her life. And you also have in chapter 24 the narration by Pocket, who disabuses Candide of his perception that she is happy. So what is common between the narratives of these three women is that they have been the subject of abuse, all types of abuse by men and by the world. So in these episodes, or three episodes, these episodes are told from a feminine perspective. So as it is as if Voltaire is giving us history from the point of view of its victims, and obviously this is new. So in these three episodes, Candide is trying to tell us as readers um, that you shouldn't be listening to what Alexander Pope and Leibniz are saying about the world as a perfect place, optimistic and everything, because those women have seen a lot of suffering and a lot of tragedy. Um, Pangloss, of course, is a representation of Pope and Leibniz and the philosophy of optimism, and his philosophy is exposed by what those three women are going to tell in their narratives. So all three women tell tales of spectacular suffering and misadventure. One of the most important female characters in Candide is Conigand, and Conigand has to flee for her life, and she moves from one place to another. She was a princess at one point. Her father was well off, but when the war started, she has to flee for her life. She is going to be rescued by a brave prince. Not really. I mean, over time, she will be given into slavery. She is going to kind of be exploited sexually and everything, and she's going to move from uh, one owner to another. One. Um, so what happened to Kierkegaard is a lot. She has been suffering a lot, abused a lot. She has sometimes been reduced to a sexual plaything, moving as if she is a mere thing between people. So Kierkegaard recounts her story in Lesbos, which gives Voltaire a chance to portray the injustices meted out against women. So it's not only women, obviously, it's all the minorities of the time. So those minorities were women, were Protestants, were intellectuals, and the Jews. These are the minorities that everything was happening against at the time. Um, so what does Kierkegaard think of the philosophy of optimism as given by Bangles? Of course, she utterly refuses it and rejects it because what she has been through kind of belies all of that, confirms the fact that it's the worst of all possible worst that they used to live, and not like Bangles is saying. Bangles is saying that we live in the best of all possible worlds, which is obviously not true. Um, she's very straightforward and very practical. She's telling things as they are, not as they should be. It's again because she has been through a lot herself. And then we have the old woman also giving us her side of the story. And obviously, it's not a bright side of things. Again, this woman was also abused by men. Um, she has or she had to do very to engage in very bad practices in order to live. Um, she was kind of abused on a number of occasions. And then you have the Dutch slave, who is also giving us his story. Again, if anything, the Dutch slave is meant to tell us that the world is not what people are saying, uh, is not what people are saying it is. The world is worse than the world in which dogs, for example, live in. So the slave tells his suffering from his mother. His mother, even his mother, sells him on the coast of Guinea to a Dutch master, and they started to cut off his right hand and left leg. Perhaps he's going to work as a beggar, and if you have those limbs cut, you can perhaps generate more money. So this African mother and this Dutch owner both benefit by the enslavement of this guy. Uh, so this Dutch slave is telling when he sees the optimism of Bangladesh, he tells him that I am 1,000 times more miserable than dogs, monkeys, and parrots. And when Candide sees that, and when he hears what this slave is saying, he starts to have doubts about the philosophy, optimistic philosophy of Pangloss, and he says, "Oh, Pangloss, this is one abomination you could not have anticipated, and I fear it has finally done for me. I'm giving up on your optimism at all. I'm saying that I don't believe in your optimism anymore because of the miseries that I have seen and the suffering that people went through." So, so the female characters and the Dutch slave, when they tell their stories, they tell it in a very practical way. They don't shy away from telling what happened to them because it's suffering that they have been through. They cannot beautify things. They are not theoretical. They are deeply entrenched in reality, and reality that is sordid and miserable. Okay, so this was happening in Europe. You're going to see that the narrative is going to shift to some place outside Europe. And it is as if Voltaire is trying to tell us that we're so fed up with Europe, with the suffering that people go through, with unjustified optimism. We're going to try another country or perhaps another continent. So we're going to have Candide traveling to a place called El Dorado. And El Dorado is different from Europe. It's a place where people thinks very little of precious things. I mean, gold is all over the place. It is, kind of dispersed on the ground, and nobody is interested in it. So gold that people are fighting over and that wars are waged because I mean because of which is now on the ground and nobody's interested in it. So this is a legendary country in the far hinterland of South America where gold was as common as any other rock. What he noticed, I mean, what Candide and his servant Cacambo noticed over there, he noticed that people live beyond 100 and they are very healthy. Obviously, they don't have religions that they can fight over. Money for them means very little, gold means little. And this is perhaps Voltaire's way of telling us perhaps we have to get rid of our worries about money, about possession. So we need to get rid of those cravings for material cravings and see how life is. We don't have to be hooked on gold and buying gold. And we have a country in the world where those things mean very little, and the result is that those people are very healthy, they live beyond 100 years. So perhaps this is Voltaire's version of utopia. For him, El Dorado is utopia, where everything is perfect, where people live until 100 and 100 something, and they are completely healthy. However, do Candide or do Candide and Cacambo, his servant, uh, um, like it? No, obviously they don't like it, which means that perhaps it's the problem is with human beings themselves. They decide to collect as much gold as they can, and they try to escape from this in order to go to the world, go to the old world. Again, this is a failed attempt at finding a perfect place. It is also as if Voltaire is trying to tell us that there is no such thing as a utopia or a perfect place. Uh, so again, it's all about this old El Dorado kind of thing and what they have found. They met a guy who is 172 years old, and they have seen him very fit and very physically okay. And they have noticed that he and his other people, and the people who are in this kind of country, think very little of gold. Gold means nothing for them. So the old man lives in a modest house, and the definition of modesty is different here. The door of his house is merely of silver, and the paneling in the apartment merely of gold. Can you see? It's gold and silver that they are decorating their houses is with. And obviously, um, the house is referred to as being modest because this is not the perhaps the most beautiful of the house. This is a small thing. Again, they don't show interest in um, things that are very expensive. And this is perhaps one reason why this guy lives or lived until he is 175 years old. Again, there is this also the stress that Candide and Kakam, being from the old world, are not happy with what they have seen because if they stay there, money would mean nothing because people are not interested in money. But when they go back to the old country with the with gold, it would mean a lot. Which means that they are genuine. They are not genuinely after seeking a better world, a world that has values like freedom of expression, like compassion and equality for women. No, they are not after that. They are greedy and they are after money and everything. And this is what they are after. Candide, for example, would say, "We shall be richer than all the kings put together. We shall no longer have inquisitors to fear, and we shall easily rescue Kjörngan." So it's about being rich, not living in a perfect democratic society. So again, if they leave this place, it means that Voltaire is trying to say there is no such thing as a perfect place or a utopia. And then they move on, and they go to other places in order to check those other places. And one of the places that they are going to end in is um, Constantinople in Turkey. And here, Voltaire is giving us what he thinks about a place like Turkey. Of course, he is European and he believes he has those biases against Islam and against Muslims and Muslim countries. And he talks all the time about the tyranny of the Muslim world, where you have dictatorships, people are not allowed to express their opinions and everything. And he's saying perhaps not being able to express your opinion is a good thing, because when you express it, you create issues and problems. Um, they move on. Um, and again, it's this search for a perfect place. I mean, they left Europe and they went to El Dorado. They couldn't bear it, and then they moved to the Middle East. Again, what characterized the Middle East, according to them, is the idea of fatalism. The fact that Muslims are fatalistic. Fatalistic means that they believe in fate. And Voltaire is trying to say that Muslims and Orientals believe in fate so much so that they consider their bad, corrupt rulers as their fate. This has been decided by God. If we have a bad ruler, we should not revolt, we should not do anything, because this was ordained by God. This is what God wants. Otherwise, he wouldn't have been there. And he's saying that the despotic regimes of the time, I mean, the Muslim rulers, are trying to promote this kind of narrative so that they can maintain the status quo. Again, he's giving us a picture of the Orient or of the East, and he's saying, why don't we try? Perhaps they have what we don't have. It is true that we have democracy and everything and rule of law, but we're not happy still. We have miseries. So why don't we try what they are trying? Why don't we try being under dictatorships and under all these kinds of things? And Edward Said, the very famous historian, a Palestinian American, has something to say about it. He believes in his Orientalism, a very famous work, that those Westerns started to talk very bad about us, that we are fatalists, that we don't do anything against dictatorships, and our rulers are dictators, and we are sensual, we're this and that. And we started to believe them and internalize what they say, until we came to the stage where we ourselves are saying these things about ourselves. Okay, so where are we now? We are in Turkey. So what kind of people is listen, let me, because I have a class at 4, let me tell them that I'll come at 4:30.
Doctor, what's the meaning of dervish?
Darwish. You know Darwish?
Yeah, but the same
Yeah,
sign.
it's it's I think it's taken primarily from the Turkish language. What do we know about the dervish? How does he look like? Does he look in shape? Does he look organized? If if you can even look it up in Google, for example, you're going to have somebody who has, I mean, unkempt beard. I mean, his clothes are normally torn. Sometimes he or she has something on his head. and he speaks a language that no one understands. It's not that he speaks English, or it's not that he speaks Turkish, or he speaks the language of his country, but not in a logical way, because it's full of prayers. It's more of what we call the village idiot, and which is a very famous image in literature. Sometimes you see mentally retarded individual who moves around with clothes torn, and so the dervish is not mentally retarded, of course, but he looks like one in terms of how he dresses. He lives on the margin of society. He eats whatever comes his way. He has very little access to anything. But he lives, according to Voltaire, as we're going to see, he lives a happy life. His life is not complicated. And he is more of a philosopher. He gives you nuggets of wisdom when he speaks. That's why sometimes in Arabic they say خذوا الحكمة من أفواه المجانين, right? So it is as if Voltaire is trying, why don't we go and look and see how this dervish leads his life? Is he happy? Is he sad? And they went. And of course, Pangloss is going to impose his agenda on the guy. And he's going to ask him, okay, so with the miseries that we have around us, or what, with the miseries that everybody is saying we have around, what should we do? What must we do? And you see, the dervish is telling him, keep your mouth shut. Are you getting the point? So perhaps you and everybody else, if you keep your mouth shut, all the issues and the problems of the world will be fixed and solved. So very little, but very wise. What do you think? What the dervish did more was that he slammed the door in the face of Pangloss. So the dervish is a philosophy that is based on the idea of not interfering in the business of others. And Pangloss has a philosophy of optimism, and he speaks about everything. He interferes in everything. So you're having the dervish, and his philosophy is shutting the door against Pangloss, which means that the dervish is uh, presented as victorious over Pangloss. And then we have another wise man. This is an old man that Candide and the other people, Pangloss and everyone else, are going to go to away from the city. They are going to go to the farm of the old man in order to see what kind of life he lives. And they have found that this guy lives or has a detached uh, attitude towards power and powerful people. He stays away from the city where there is politicians and everything. And he says, I never inquire about what happens in Constantinople. Constantinople is obviously the big city, but I live away from this city and I don't interfere in their business. They do what they want. I don't care. What I care about most is my garden, my farm. I mind my own business. So this is another indication that perhaps Voltaire is trying to tell us, mind your own business. Keep your mouth shut. Because what happened when you opened your mouth and when you spoke, You wrote books that promote wars. You wrote books that promoted the love of money. You engaged in talk about bad things. You taught things or you taught people bad things. So why don't you keep your mouth shut? Why don't you mind your own business? And in this way, you can live a perfect life. Perhaps this is the perfect life that you guys are looking for. Again, um, it seems that Candide is getting the message and is learning his lesson. He starts to contradict Pangloss, perhaps for the first time. He starts to show that he is not really convinced with Pangloss and his optimistic philosophy, and he is more into the philosophy of the dervish and the philosophy of the old man. He simply says, I mean, Candide, at the end, we must cultivate our garden. So cultivating your garden means that you're going to mind your own business. You're going to focus on your farm. And focusing on your farm means that you are not going to do something that would harm others. Sometimes they even people normally say if you keep yourself busy, uh, you normally don't harm other people because you're busy. If you're not busy, you start to think of very bad things. So this is perhaps the lesson that we're learning. This is perhaps how Voltaire sees the world. Okay, we have tried democracies in Europe and we have seen brutalizing, we have seen natural disasters and infighting and civil wars, and then we went to the Americas. We were not happy with the El Dorado because this is not the kind of life that we would settle for. And then we went to the Middle East, those fatalistic people whose philosophies seem very simple. Mind your own business and keep your mouth shut. But does he say it? Does he say that I recommend the Muslim way of life? No, he doesn't say it. He leaves it all to you and you judge for yourself. So this is basically what Candide is about. It's a journey as much as it is physical, it is also philosophical and intellectual. We have gone through places, physical places and countries and continents, it is true, but we have gone into our own minds. It was a journey of the mind and the soul as well, where people started to realize that there is more to life than material cupidity, there is more to life than having a position and having a career. And simplicity is the best policy. Cultivate your garden and mind your own business seems to be, and keep your mouth shut seems to be the message that Voltaire is indirectly get across to us. With this item and on this note, we come to the end of today's class. I need to meet you tomorrow for a revision class where we're going to go over the midterm items. So when do you think you're ready tomorrow, inshallah?
inshallah يا دكتور.
طيب, when can we meet? Can we meet at 4 tomorrow?
Yes, doctor. For me, yes.
Yes.
Yes, doctor.
Because we
Of
have
course.
master classes tomorrow.
عندكم ماستر كلاس مع مين؟
No,
اه
from 12 to 2 I think so 4 is a good.
Yeah طيب يبقى 4 إن شاء الله. احنا we're going to go over الثلاث حاجات Othello, The Duchess of Malfi and Candide إن شاء الله. I'll send you the slides إن شاء الله. ماشي؟ يلا أشوفكم على خير. السلام عليكم.
شكرا، مع السلامة.
Thank you, Doctor.
You're welcome.
Thank you.
Bye bye.